Hello, Cohasset, and welcome to another edition of Our Town. I'm Mark DiGiacomo, together with my partner, Pat Martin. Today's casual Saturday, since we're filming in the middle of a snowy Saturday afternoon. At least I decided not to get dressed up.
This is casual for me.
There you
This
go.
is casual
there
for
you
me.
go. Good, good. And today we're going to be talking to Sam Wakeman about the governance committee and one of the articles that is on the warrant for our town meeting, which will be coming up on the 10th,
Right.
which is Monday the 10th of December.
So we're about a week out, and the warrants have been sent home, so people have a chance to look at them. Unfortunately, a lot of them have not been reviewed or have no recommendations yet. The one that seems like it may be the most talked about or contentious seems to be about the Town Manager Act, so we can maybe talk a little bit about that, because that did come through governance initially in the discussions of the work that they did. We'll find out exactly about their charge and what they did.
And we've tried to get some of the other folks from town government on to talk about some of the other warrant articles, but I think, as Pat said, the selectmen, the advisory committee, and so forth are still trying to review all these articles,
Right.
and really at this point really weren't ready to talk about them yet. So be sure to be at town meeting, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion about all of them, especially the article we will be talking about today with Sam.
Right, and Peter Pescatori, chairman of the advisory committee, did say that they'll be continuing to review through the week. We're about a week out from town meeting happening, and he did say that they hope to get the recommendations as they came in up on the town website, so folks can check the town website if they're interested in see how the advisory committee voted, what the selectmen voted, so that they're fully aware of all the votes and recommendations as they go into town meeting on Monday night.
Right. So we're going to take a quick break now, and we'll be right back with Sam Wakeman and the town manager article on the warrant.
And welcome back. And with us is Sam Wakeman. Sam is a member of the governance committee. Sam, start us off by telling us the background of the governance committee. When was it formed? Why was it formed? And what's its charge?
The governance committee was put together in December. Well, the initial thought of it, let me put it this way, was put together in December of 2011. At that point, if you all remember, we had a lot of controversy going on within the Town Manager Act. What did it mean? What did the town bylaws mean? And so we had quite a bit of confusion. And the selectmen put together the governance committee by asking members of the community to serve, and they charged the governance committee with analyzing the town's bylaws, committee structure, and all related acts in order to make recommendations on revisions if necessary. We started meeting in January, and what we initially thought was going to be a pretty quick task, we quickly became aware that this was pretty monumental. We took the town bylaws and the Town Manager Act with the revisions to the Town Manager Act and compared those and found out we had a large number of discrepancies. The bylaw said one thing, the Town Manager Act said another, and the wording was not clear. So we knew we had to clean that up. We also, at the same time, took and put together a survey to go out to all the town committees, asking them how they were enabled, who their members were, what they were charged with, how they were funded, and so forth. And we've accumulated all that information, and we've started to work through committee by committee. In February, March, we started looking at prioritizing what we had to do. Because we felt it was important that we start to get some things accomplished, if we could, before the annual town meeting. And we knew that we probably would not make the special town meeting in November for a lot of the review we had to do, and we'd be working into 2013. So the first thing we zeroed in on was the town budget process. what that process was, what the various groups were that should be involved, and how it should flow. Coming out of the financial disaster that we had been in, we thought that was an extremely important thing to do, and it was something that we felt we could do in short order because we had some ideas about how it should be processed. So we came up with a recommended process involving the selectmen, the advisor committee, capital budget, finance director, town manager, and presented that to the selectmen. And I think if you recall the Springtown meeting, that was presented at that point in time. So the budget for 2014 will be the first year that it's really gone through this process.
Let me bring you back, Sam. When the committee was first formed, am I remembering wrong? Did that come out of the whole problem with the folks on the Conservation Commission being let go, or I thought that was the genesis of?
I don't know if that was the only genesis. I think that was one of the driving factors. Mm-hmm. I think all the controversy with our prior town manager, Mike Coughlin, was also driving it.
For the Conservation
people saying, gee, he's
before.
not doing it the way we think it should be done, and
mm-hmm.
you know, and it was kind of a controversial time, I guess you could say, in town government, mm-hmm. and it grew out of all of that. The Conservation Commission, I'm sure, was a driving force, but I think there were others when you looked at it.
And was part of what you would be looking at whether some boards that should be elected as opposed to appointed, and vice versa, and that kind of situation?
We're looking at the elected versus appointed boards, elected versus appointed positions. Should they remain the way they are? Should they not? Should there are various committees really not needed? Are there committees that can be combined? And we have a number in town. We have a number of committees that almost do the same thing. So mm-hmm. why don't we combine them? Maybe broaden their scope of definition so that we make it a little bit more efficient.
How many members are on the governance committee?
Currently, we have 9 members on the governance committee.
And is that
committee.
What you're supposed to have is 9, or
well,
are there empty seats?
It's kind of, we need 5 for a quorum.
Okay.
So we need only a minimum of 5, and we would still welcome anybody who was really interested in coming on, although at this point, you have a lot of homework to catch up.
So there's no definitive number of members for the governance committee?
No, there's no maximum number.
And is it open to everybody, or does Troika pick some, or was one of those deals, or who appoints the governance committee?
We are basically self-selecting.
Really?
Oh, that's interesting.
Wow.
I guess that's the simple way to put it. I mean, you have to get sworn in and
right.
so forth.
But it's not appointed by the selectmen or the Troika
by
or
the
anything?
Troika or the selectmen.
You guys just decide who you want to have as members,
mm-hmm.
and there's no cap on or number
right.
on how many. Well,
we're trying to keep the political
unique.
Influence out of it so that
okay.
it doesn't get stacked one way or the other.
Do I remember that there was an issue about when you meet? Did you meet in the evenings like all other committees, or?
No, we tried to get together to meet in the evenings, but it wasn't working. Nobody could meet then. We've pretty much settled on Thursday at 7:30 in the morning.
Well, isn't that a problem though, Sam, for people that want to attend your meetings? I mean, you've got to be about the only group I know that meet in the mornings
mm-hmm.
when folks are working and so forth.
I think it is a problem, but I don't have an easy answer. If you want the committee to meet, and that's when they can do it. We had a lot of difficulty with meeting at night. People couldn't be there because of families and so forth. And
yeah, and I guess the criticism,
I don't know if there's an easy answer.
Right. I guess the criticism is if any committee, and you're looking at all committees, but
right.
we're looking at yours now, you should be able to meet at a time when the public can come to your meetings and observe them.
Yes.
And if members can't do that, then maybe they shouldn't be members.
Possibly.
You've heard that criticism.
No,
I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you are having looked at all the other committees in town, is there any other committee that meets other than in the evenings?
I can't answer that question because we haven't gotten through the detail on all of them.
I mean, I don't know of any, but.
I don't know.
Okay.
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
So tell us, Sam, what was the initial response? Are you getting a lot of cooperation? I mean, it seems like a tough spot, too, for you guys to come in and say, okay, now we're going to open up this committee, take a look at it, you know, stir the pot, so to speak, or maybe make changes that have historically been in place for a long time. Did you find a lot of fear, resistance, or are most people just happy to move forward?
What we try to do is start out and listen to the members of the committee who come, explain why their particular position or committee exists and what its purpose is. We haven't gotten too much resistance yet, but we haven't tackled anything controversial. So we're getting there, but we're not there yet.
So what you've actually done at this point is a lot of review and substantively the budget process. You say that was the new budget process that was brought up at town meeting. Remind me, was that actually a voted on, or was it just
it was
articulated?
It was a recommendation that was articulated, and the selectmen adopted it.
Okay.
So I don't think it was a town meeting-wide vote at all, but
Right.
it was
more just
trying to
advising.
tell the voters, okay, we realize we've had problems with this, and here's what we're going to do to try to solve it.
So what is the difference? I mean, what is the improvement to that process that you're putting in place come 2014?
Well, it forces an involvement of advisory committee, capital budget, finance director, selectman, and town manager working all together on the budget. I think if you recall last fall, our town manager didn't want the involvement of the advisory committee and didn't want the involvement of the capital budget committee. And we feel that one of the things, sort of an overriding issue in the town, is that this is a small town, everybody tends to know everybody, and they want a collaborative effort. They want people of the town working together to solve the town's problems. Maybe we're wrong on that, but that's the feeling we have, and so we're moving along with that in mind in everything we try to do.
Okay, and so for the next year's fiscal budget will be the first time that this will actually be in place?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we did pieces of it earlier, but not in a as defined structure as this.
Now, you didn't mention the school committee. Obviously, they play a very important role in the budget process.
Well, the school committee is involved because there's a budget planning group, and the school committee's involved with that, along with the superintendent and the business manager, as is the town manager and the finance director. So we're trying to take all financial constituencies, is that a good way to put it, and get them together and have them work through the whole process. We had done a little bit of that about 2 years ago, and then when Bill Griffin left, it sort of lay fallow because it was tied into a long-range budget planning process.
Okay, so you've got that in place, and that took that was back in the spring. So then, where did you move on to?
Well, then we've been working on the Town Manager Act.
Okay.
And
Why did you decide to work on the Town Manager Act?
we had to start somewhere. We had to start with the Town Manager Act or the bylaws, and we just thought that with all the controversy that had gone on, that the Town Manager Act was a logical place to start.
Did it have to do with Mike Milanowski and his kind of awkward situation of having actually served on your board, right?
Yes.
And then being elevated, and this issue, which we'll talk a lot about.
Right.
Is that why you dove into it at that time?
No, it was sort of, we would have tried to have done it for the spring town meeting, but when we looked at it, we said, we just can't, we don't have time to finish this, to get through it in a proper fashion. And we didn't want to do something halfway on it. We wanted to be very thorough, very complete, and work through it point by point section by section, and make sure that we all understood it. And it's been, I guess, controversial within the governance committee, but we've discussed it a lot. We've had people from DOR in, assistants from the state, and discussing what you can do here, what you can't do there. We still have not had it reviewed by town council, but we want to get our draft of what we think it should be done, and then have town council review it so we can work on it all at once.
Let's talk a little about the history. The Town Manager Act, is it, to a lot of us, it still seems kind of new, but it's what, a dozen years old now or so that when we adopted it?
I think it's older than that. Was it 97 that it was, that we passed it?
97. So before that, we just had a town administrator, kind of a weak person. The Board of Selectmen really ran the town. And then, if I remember correctly, I think it was on a citizen's petition that the town manager form of government was adopted.
Yes, it was, and it was a very sparsely attended town meeting that passed it.
Right.
And from all I can gather, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but everybody tells me all we did was take the Hull Town Manager Act, put in some revisions, and then put that in place. So I don't know if it's ever had a thorough review from the citizens for them to say, how do we want this town governed?
And so technically what we did was your memory is, took the Hull Town Manager Act.
Well, that's what I'm told.
Right, no, I understand.
I don't remember it, so.
And then what we needed to do was the Great and General Court had to adopt that, right?
Yes,
we
correct.
asked our representatives and senators to present it, and that was presented, it was adopted, and now we're allowed to have this town manager form of government. And the Hull Act, or whatever we adopted, is viewed as a strong town manager act compared to some other towns have adopted.
Yes,
Is that fair to say?
mean it's referred to as a strong town manager act. I call it a confusing town manager act, but
okay, all right. And is that just the standalone thing that you're looking at, or is there any other overlay? Explain that.
Once we get through the Town Manager Act and can finalize that, we will then go back to the town bylaws and make sure that the bylaws are matching in terms of verbiage, authority, and everything else with the Town Manager Act.
Because they were in place before the Town Manager Act came in. Okay.
Correct.
But they were never amended to reflect.
They're in conflict.
Okay.
You know, I can't remember all the specifics, but we have a bunch of details of, you know, there are ones between elected appointed positions, budget process and authority, who's eligible. It's different in the bylaws versus the Town Manager Act. So that shouldn't be.
So you're going to go through the Town Manager Act first and try to make some kind of, you know, line of delineation or a matchup, and then go in and then do the same thing to the bylaws?
We'll do the Town Manager Act. Finalize that as to what we think it should be, okay?
As
and
it
all
stands
we'll
on
do
its
is
own.
make a recommendation that hopefully we're shooting for the Springtown meeting to have the whole act ready and together. And if it is adopted by the voters of Cohasset, it will then go to the legislature, get thrown into their legislative mill, and there's a lot of discussion about whether it gets thrown right in or whether you have to wait for their next session, and you know the
but it
politics
will pass
of
once it gets there. These things go
yeah,
through.
generally speaking, once the legislature has decided to put it into their, I don't know, agenda or so forth, it generally is pretty much a rubber stamp.
So you'll decide, you guys will make your recommendation on the changes that should happen with the Town Manager Act.
Correct.
And the parallel changes in the bylaw to match up.
Well, we may not have the bylaw finished by that time, but we would hope to.
So we decide the Town Manager Act changes, that gets approved, send it off to Boston.
Correct.
And then start changing the bylaws so it'll all match up.
Yes.
Is the concept.
Right.
Okay. Now, there was some discussion that you guys were going to be bringing this before the special town meeting coming up on December 10th, but a little while ago,
I don't know who the discussion was from.
well, I guess it was anticipated that it might happen, let's say that.
Okay.
But then you guys did come out maybe a month or so ago and say that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think when it was brought up, we said it wasn't going to happen because we knew we couldn't finish the job by then.
Because you want to take on the entire act, not just
Right.
cherry-pick little pieces of it.
Yeah.
And yet, we have a cherry-picked little piece is on this
That's correct.
agenda. But it wasn't put on by you.
No, it was put on by the selectmen.
And I don't know if you can represent what the entire governance committee thinks of it or just your personal view of going forward piecemeal as opposed to waiting until the spring for an entire review that you guys will be doing.
The piece that the selectmen have put on is what we would agree should, that particular section, that's how that section should be rewritten. We don't have any conflict with what it says. Our conflict would be more with the timing of it, that the Town Manager Act in its entirety should be presented for revision, not piecemeal.
Why?
Because we think you should look at the thing all as one complete act.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, and this is my opinion, I don't think that this particular section that we're looking at in the town meeting is in conflict with anything else that we've done so far. We've been through about, I guess, 10 or 11 sections of the Town Manager Act in detail and voted on whether we should change it and what those changes should be, but we still have about 4 or 5 to go. But it doesn't look like this will be in conflict with anything, but I think when you start piecemealing an act that's going to govern your town, you're tackling one small part of it, and you really should look at the whole thing and why it's for the good of the town and why it might be better governance than what we have now.
So would you recommend a no vote on this and wait until the whole thing comes up in the spring?
I won't vote this down because it's presented now. But if it were my preference, I would not have presented it.
Let's just for...
I will vote in favor of it because I think it's a logical change to the Town Manager Act.
You just wish that it
I just don't
held
think it
off
had been
until-
handled the way it's been handled.
And let's just, for our viewing audience, read the change. It's only a sentence long, and it's a little confusing about what's being added and what's being taken out. But I take it what this is supposed to say is that the existing section 3I or 3 Roman, I don't know if that's Roman I or what. No person holding elective or appointive office in the town shall, within 1 year of holding such office, be eligible to be appointed to the position of town manager. I think that's the way it currently reads.
That's correct, I believe.
And the change, again, it's a little hard on the warrant, but I think what it's now, the intent is now it should read, no present or former selectman of the town shall, within 15 months of holding such office, be eligible to be appointed to the position of town manager. So 2 changes are being made there. I guess the most significant is that right now, anybody who holds an elective or appointive office has to wait a year before they can become town manager.
Correct.
And the change would be only present or former selectmen would have to wait. And instead of a year, they'd have to wait 15 months.
Correct.
Okay. So let's start with the easier one. Why the change from 1 year to 15 months?
To try to make sure you go through a full election cycle.
Okay, all right.
It's more of a timing issue that you want to make sure that you get fully through the cycle.
All right. Well, as I said, that was the easier one. The other one is where all the controversy
Correct.
Stems from. And I think the controversy and the issues that people have raised is that this appears to be a change specifically made for one specific situation that we've run into now, which is Mike Malinowski, who the selectmen are very fond of, think he's doing a great job,
Right.
and I think a lot of other people at Town Hall think he's doing a great job, and they want to have him as town manager, not just as acting town manager.
Correct.
And I guess as you've sat on the advisory committee for many years, as I remember. Now you're on
Right.
governance, and you've been very involved. Is it good policy to be making changes to our bylaws to just deal with one particular person in one particular situation?
Well, I think I already told you. I would rather look at the act in its entirety and vote on it in entirety, not piecemeal it. I don't. It's the same issue you get with zoning bylaws. When you bring a small piece of a zoning bylaw to town meeting and somebody tries to amend it on the floor, and you get all kinds of unintended consequences that nobody thinks about, and things don't get thoroughly vetted and presented as a complete product.
So can you speak to the timing of this? Is it so urgent that they needed to get it through now for a contract piece? I mean,
this
why
becomes very unclear, Pat. It depends where you sit, and it depends what legal advice you get, which from what I can see has been somewhat misleading, and I'm going to sort of, here's my understanding. I don't know if it's totally correct or not correct, but I think it probably gives you a general flavor of why there's a lot of confusion. At one point, when Mike Malinowski was first appointed, town council had no problem with this. He'd already been appointed on a board, and that didn't seem to present a problem for him.
When you say no problem with this, what do you mean? With making him a
appointing
town
him
manager?
as an interim or temporary acting
Okay.
town manager.
Clearly, he couldn't be a regular town manager because of this.
Well, I don't know if that question was ever asked. Okay, so I'm giving you sort of
Sure.
just pieces of it that may be inaccurate in some respects, but what I've been led to believe is that town council didn't have a problem with it. So he's saying, well, that's within the scope of the town bylaws, Town Manager Act at this point. Well, I read the wording and I say, I don't know. Maybe he interprets it differently than I do. He has later come back and said that, oh no, if you make him interim town manager, this may be a problem. But he told the selectmen it was okay to have a contract for Mike Malinowski through June. So I'm unclear as to what it means. What I think we as a governance committee felt strongly about was let's step back from this situation. We don't want to use this situation as a guide to us. We want to try to look at what might be the best thing for a town. And we felt pretty strongly that any organization, town, business, nonprofit, whatever, should have the opportunity to promote from within. These are people you know their performance, they're given their strengths, their weaknesses, in other words, you know what you have. And what have we gone through? 3 town managers, and we found out what we got after the fact, not going in. So we felt very strongly there wasn't any good reason that we could think of why an elected or appointed person in a town office or committee should not be eligible to be town manager.
Except for a selectman.
Except for a selectman, because a selectman is the town manager's boss, very simply. And that would mean they'd be appointing one of their own.
Right.
So we needed to remove that portion from the sort of politics of the situation.
Well, when Mike was here a couple months ago, we talked to him about this, and he explained that as acting town manager, as opposed, which he, strongly felt that's what you've got to call me.
Yeah.
And acting town manager, he had exactly the same powers as a town manager.
Correct.
In his salary and everything else, there was really no difference between acting and actual. And I think everybody acknowledges the obvious, that the only reason he's acting is a way to get around the current section that we're talking about.
Yeah. Well,
so I guess people do wonder, and I guess you wonder too, well, what's the hurry? If Mike he's doing the job, selectmen are very happy with him, he's got all the powers of a town manager, why are we rushing through this one piece and not waiting for the whole thing? And I guess that's what you're saying.
I can't answer that question.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
kind of a question you have too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one good reason to want to get rid of the existing language and revise this is so that you can move ahead when you think you have somebody good and make a long-term commitment to them, because changes within the town take time. We've been through a series of, 2 6-month managers, or you could say with Steve Lombard and Mike Coughlin. How do you get any long-term change done there? You can just bring an idea up, but you can't have any thorough vetting or discussion or implementation of it. So,
Well, it sounds like, and just trying to understand why this is being pushed, when you guys who are in charge of, we're tasked with doing this, are saying, don't do this now, hold off.
no,
And
we're
yet the
not saying that. We're saying
you're
here's
saying-
where we've gotten this far.
But you want them to hold off. You
My
would rather this isn't
personal
going this way.
opinion
Yeah.
is to do the act as a whole.
Right.
We have others on the committee who say, no, let's go ahead and get this changed.
Right, and we are just
And we
talking about
haven't
your
voted
personal
on whether it should go to the special town meeting or not. We've only voted on that, yes, this section should definitely be changed.
It just feels like maybe the thing is that the selectmen are a little concerned, and maybe town council is a little concerned that this is a little squishy and would like to get it taken care of sooner rather than later.
Could be.
So that we could
Could
make,
very
make
well
Mike
be,
the town
yeah.
manager, which is clearly what they'd like to do.
Right.
Well, a lot of, I think, the critics and the opponents of this who are speaking out in town are hitting on that point that you said about the contract that originally may have not been proper. They talk about him being an illegal contract. And is that because they feel like, again, it was extended 15 months to an acting person? I mean,
I don't know,
that seems
Pat.
to be, their
I
biggest.
mean, I try to pull back from all this legal
right.
hocus pocus, because I think we get driven too much by it, and look at what's the logical thing to do.
Right.
Do we think that Mike Milanowski is doing a good job? I personally think he is. I think he's a known quantity. I think if you take the time to listen to him and understand him, you know where he's going. And I think his heart is in the right direction for the town in terms of changing things that we need to change. And I would rather see him stay than go out and do another search right now, because
costs
I'm
money.
not sure what we're going to get out of that search.
Right.
Well, that's true. I think the folks who have concerns, and they're out there and they're vocal
Right.
About these concerns. They want the search done, but I guess the argument is the selectmen are 100%. Well, I shouldn't say. Mrs. Yesterby, maybe not so
80%
much.
behind, let's say.
But the others feel very, very strongly.
Yep.
And we could go through the whole search, and unless you think that they're going to find somebody and do a 180 on Mike, why bother? They've decided, 4 of them are very, very strong, right, wrong, or indifferent. They feel very strongly about it, and so why go through the effort? If you're not happy with the selectmen, then every year there's 1 or 2 of them are up for re-election.
That's right. I mean, you can go to the ballot and vote them out if you don't like what they're doing.
But is there also another concern that seems to be emerging, or a fear of latent Cohasset, that suddenly it seems like, it's very litigious? I mean, if we don't make proper personnel decisions, hiring, firing, procedures, that a lawsuit could come out. You know, surely we just settled one with an employee that was let go. There's rumors of others coming. I guess Coughlin himself says he's bringing one. Do you think that is what's driving folks into this fear that, oh my goodness, we don't want to have more lawsuits and more payouts?
Maybe. You know, we have no personnel manual in this town. We have
Amazing.
no guideline to tell employees or to tell their managers how things should be done.
Wow, is that something that you guys would then be moving on to address, or?
Well,
no?
I mean, I think I know that Mike feels we definitely need one. I believe he has it in process, but it's not, it hasn't been. I mean, it's kind of, if you think back over the last 2 years, it's been kind of scary. We didn't know where we were financially. We were in Never Land, you know. Bills are getting paid out of accounts they shouldn't be. Money's being moved here and there, you know.
How could that happen? How could that happen? I mean, were you on the advisory at the time?
Lack of attention. I
Yeah.
mean, I will clearly say that I think we on the advisory committee are partly at fault on it. The selectmen were at fault on it. The town manager was at fault on it. The finance director was at fault. I mean, it was, the water commissioners were partly at fault. The sewer commissioners were partly at fault. Everybody was. We weren't working through these things on a collaborative effort. We weren't talking to each other enough. We weren't, you know, I mean, Mike Buckley got hit over the head with the water and sewer projects. He didn't have the resources to control them. I mean, water and sewer should have paid for more people in the finance accounting area. But it doesn't do any good to go back and point fingers. I
Well,
mean,
other than you don't repeat the mistakes.
yeah,
hopefully.
don't repeat the mistake.
And what it sounds like what you've done, your committee, is try to put into place a system where that type of thing it won't happen again.
Yes. We tried
at
to,
least on the budget piece of it.
well, and we're trying to do the same thing on the Town Manager Act. We want to take personalities out of the equation, so to speak, and make it clear what the responsibilities are, not what somebody thinks their responsibilities should be, but what they actually are and how that individual has to interact with other committees and people.
Well, I think that's, with Mike Coughlin, that seemed to be a big issue, where he seemed to take certain actions and people would say, why are you doing that? And he said, because I can.
Yeah.
And the selectmen would say, well, what about us? And he'd say, well, read the Town Manager Act.
Right.
I can do this. And I understand you're still looking at the Town Manager Act, but can we anticipate that they might not be as strong as it is now? Will there be some checks and balances put in? Do you think that's appropriate?
That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to come out with a Town Manager Act that creates a collaborative process for governance within the town. Because we felt that, I mean, Mike Coughlin demonstrated one thing to us, that if you want to spend enough money in legal bills, you could probably prove any point you want within our Town Manager Act. You can take it and interpret it however you want to your advantage. And we would rather not be in that situation.
You'd rather get it a little easier to and direct to understand. And again, once you get it there, we're going to move a little more toward town manager may do this with the advice and consent of the selectmen, that type of thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So that it would be hard to, it would be softening the strong Town Manager Act,
Right.
and making it a little more, so that everybody would understand. We wouldn't have these kind of disputes
Right.
going
I mean,
forward. That's one of
because
your
it doesn't do
goals.
any of us any good. How can you move the town forward when all you're doing is fighting legal battles over what different documents say? It just doesn't make sense.
And it's costly too.
It's very costly. And it's emotionally costly. And it's costly to the employees because they're never sure what is what.
And we have town government folks who can be focused on other things, distracted by these types of issues.
That's right.
And we've had, I mean, Cohasset's the last few years had a rough patch. I think is probably an understatement. And just when you think it's over, something else comes up. We had another recent, the age discrimination litigation was just brought, and I mean, you're in the mix. You're at the table. Is this going to end? Are we
hope
almost
so.
near the end?
We hope so. I mean, that's what we're trying to get through to prevent in the long run. I mean, the whole age discrimination issue, maybe that would have been taken care of had we had a good personnel manual. I don't know, but not having one at all leaves everything open to interpretation.
And of course, we have the police chief now. The news has come out that his contract is just going to run its course and be over in January. Whether there'll be litigation or not, who knows?
I don't know. They had an investigation. It hasn't been made public, so I don't know what to say.
And I know it's probably beyond your purview, but is there any concerns there that there has been no public airing? A lot of charges that were made, and some were secret to the public. We don't know. There's a few that we know, and there's a few that we don't. And he's never had his public hearing to contest this. He'll be let go. His contract will end, and now he's out there with all this hanging over his head.
I would think it should come out. I mean, I think it
kind of seems fair that at least,
it seems fair that at
right
least
or wrong. I mean, maybe
you had an independent panel. Let's take what the independent panel's findings are and put them out there, right or wrong.
And if these problems are real problems, they should be out there,
Well,
and he should be able to defend himself. And
sure, and it may point out other things within the police department or within the town that we need to fix and correct. I just don't know.
Right. Doesn't look like that's going to happen right now, but this has just come out. So.
Well, I mean, they were supposed to have a hearing, and then it got canceled. I don't know if they've tried to reschedule it or not, because that was only several days ago. So we'll have to.
I'm just reading between the lines. It looks like there's no hearing. We're just going to let the contract expire. And meanwhile, we've paid a lot of money for chief of police to sit at home and do nothing since May.
True. True.
Money which we probably could have used for.
We could have. We could have. But maybe it shows us maybe we don't need the position. I don't know.
Something to look at. But some of the good news of late seems to be about the budget. You wrote an editorial piece in the Mariner this week that paints a looks like a very positive picture financially, that we're going to end with a surplus after it was anticipated that we are not.
Right.
Is that a good sign in your opinion?
I think it's a very good sign, and I think we now, I haven't had a chance to talk with Mary Gallagher recently, but my guess is from what I see that the new accounting system is really starting to take hold and is starting to work, and she now has good control over what's being spent, where it's being properly allocated. I mean, the state certified roughly $900,000 of surplus revenue that we can put into free cash stabilization funds and so forth. So that's very positive. You know,
unexpected too, considering it seemed like everybody talks about the financial disaster and then the looming issues with unpaid, liabilities.
At the time the budget was done, we realized we didn't know where we were. We realized that any information we had was probably pretty suspect, and it was like living in, it was like living, do you have enough money in your checking account? I can't tell you where I spent it, but if there's enough money there, maybe we're okay, but maybe we're not. So when we did the budget for 2012, it was very, very conservative. So we probably, underestimated revenue, overestimated expenses. I know Mike Coughlin felt last fall that yes, we were going to have a surplus. I didn't disagree that we wouldn't have a surplus, but I did ask him a question on town meeting floor about where's your new revenue that you're going to fund some of these things coming from. I didn't get a very good answer, so I kind of let it go. I shouldn't have maybe, but I did. But Avalon, got completed before we thought it would, and Mike Malinowski also put in a spending freeze, and I think the combination of all these things adds up to a profitable fiscal year. Some of that revenue we won't see again. You know, the Avalon revenue is a one-time source. I mean, yeah, you have an existing tax base, but that's not the same as all the fees that came in on it.
Well, also in the news recently is the teacher's contract has just been adopted by the school committee, and they've been without a contract for several months. And it sounded like there was a little tiff or misunderstanding with the town manager. Do I understand as far as his role in that?
Right.
Now, under the existing, is it under the existing Town Manager Act that he's given a vote on all collective bargaining agreements in town? Is that where that's found, or is that somewhere else in the bylaws?
I'd have to go back and look at it.
Okay.
I think I know there's reference in the Town Manager Act, but it's also in the bylaw, and that may be a source of conflict.
Okay.
And I think what Mike was saying is, I'm supposed to be part of your process in this, and I know nothing until the very end, and you've already approved it. So I had no chance to input. The town does fund a fair amount of the school budget. And that has been somewhat controversial about how much should the school get versus how much for the town side. And that's one reason for the budget planning group, was to try to get all those parties together and you know, air it out and come to a common agreement instead of a we versus they mentality.
Yeah, it just seemed, again, just reading in the Mariner, we know that the town manager gets a vote, and apparently everyone else did, but the vote was taken
before
without him.
he even had a chance to
and
input.
He seemed like he was out in the audience waving his hand and saying, "What about me?" There seemed to some kind of a disconnect there.
Well, my guess is, and I don't know this for certain, but my guess is what Mike would like to do is have some consistency in all collective bargaining contracts, so that you're not giving X percent to the police, Y percent to fire, W percent to the teachers. I mean, so that there's a town-wide policy, or I don't know if policy is the right word, but a town-wide position on where we would like to be with collective bargaining.
At least a range.
A range, yeah.
Even if they don't match
we'd like
up
everybody to be in this range. And then there's so many other special little deals that are added into these things that it's crazy.
So you don't see any...
I got this kick out of, well, they're going to teach 10 more minutes, and, you know, I mean, come on. It's...
Well, it's having...
We've lost sight of what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate children.
Well, that's a topic for another
that is
discussion.
Yeah.
But you don't, that particular provision as far as the town manager having the vote isn't something that's likely to change.
I don't think so. I think we want the town manager and the school committee working together on this thing. So why would we exclude him from that?
Any other changes, as again, I know you've gone through, you said like 9 out of 14 sections. Any other, what are the other ones that we might see change that are of some significance?
I'm just looking at some notes here because I get confused.
No, there's a lot.
A lot of it is verbiage changes. I mean, we had a, if you read section D and you read it carefully, it's it's incorrect as to how we actually act as a town. We hadn't really defined the troika. We didn't know who that was. But I mean, we all know who the troika is, but you know, it wasn't defined in the Town Manager Act, so that should be defined. We got into some reference to the budget process, that language needed to be cleaned up. And that, we spent a fair amount of time on that, what kind of wording and what did we mean, and how should the budget be submitted and who should get to review it and so forth. Then the section 3I, which we've gone over, we got into the section on the removal of the town manager, and what process had to happen when that occurred. We've made some minor, it's nothing huge, but minor changes to try to clean it up, so to speak. We still have, you know, we're working on the authority of the town manager and the selectmen with regard to what we call senior level appointments, fire chief, police chief, finance director, indefinite temporary appointments, what does that mean? And then to try to clean up the sentence and paragraph structure. So that's sort of a quickie overview, but it doesn't encompass everything.
And looking at, you said you're going to be looking at the other boards and whether they should be elected or appointed. Again, understanding there's been no votes or anything, but you've looked at it, your personal view. What boards that are currently appointed do you think should be elected?
Oh boy. I really haven't gone through them per se to come to a conclusion on them. One of the issues you run into in appointed versus elected is that certain boards, it's very important to have an expertise in some area. And if you appoint people, you can get that expertise in place. If you elect people, you have no guarantee that you're going to have the expertise. You know, water commissioners, sewer commissioners are elected. Is there a guarantee that they will have the expertise that's needed? I can't answer the question, so we're going to work on it.
Those are two boards that are particularly looking at as perhaps converting over to an appointed provision.
Well, should we even have should we have a sewer and water commission? You know, should they be combined? Should it be a department? You know, if you think about the water commissioners, they were formed in the late 1800s, and that's their enabling legislation. The world has changed dramatically. You know, we just used to pump some water out of a well, nobody worried about it. Now you've got to meet this requirement, that requirement. I mean, we have a whole host of highly technical things we have to get through, and the average citizen probably doesn't have that expertise.
That's an interesting perspective. All right, so as unfortunate as we'll have to wrap up, just give us then just a summary in the sense that, so you anticipate that the Town Manager Act that comes from the governance review will be before Springtown meeting. Do you anticipate some of these other pieces of recommendations for elected and appointed positions will be ready at that time, or no?
We hope so, because they're part of the Town Manager Act.
Okay.
So we have to deal with those committees at the same time. We hope to have a draft out by the first of the year. That's what we're shooting at.
Is your committee, do you have any kind of a sunset provision, or are you just going to vote yourselves out of existence once you've done all this? Or do you see yourself as carrying on?
Well, when we originally were, the committee was originally formed, the selectmen sunsetted us of December 31st of 2012. Oh boy. That's been extended to 2013.
And by then, do you feel you have completed your work?
Well, we're going to find out.
That's the goal.
We may still be going.
Right, right.
But that's our goal.
Okay. And you've indicated that on the article that's coming up, Article 14, on the December 10 town meeting, that you will vote in favor of it.
I will vote in favor of it because I think it's a change that we would make. However, I wish that the whole act would be brought as one instead of piecemeal.
And if you were a betting man, what do you think the chances? Is a majority vote?
Oh boy.
To amend the Town Manager Act?
I don't know.
It's not amending the bylaw. The bylaw, I think, would be a two-thirds.
Two-thirds.
Town Manager Act.
It might be just a majority.
Let's assume it's just a majority. What are the odds? What are you laying?
Well, there's a pretty strong political group that is trying to get rid of our current acting town manager. So, and I'm sure they will have their forces marshaled. I sort of hope they're not successful, but You know,
You
it's going to
anticipate-
depend on how many people come out.
Right.
That's right.
I mean, what the original Town Manager Act was passed with like 160 voters. I mean, it was
And with a quorum of 100 voters.
with a quorum of 100. It doesn't take very many.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say they're not anticipating many because they're having it in the auditorium versus the gym-ish for this particular one. So
Interesting.
Well, maybe the auditorium will be overflowing.
Let's
That would
hope.
be good.
Let's hope.
Sam, thanks so much for
Oh, you're
spending
welcome.
Saturday afternoon with us and helping to explain the governance committee and the work it's doing.
Well, hopefully we've added some more confusion to our lives.
Thanks again, and we'll be right back in a minute. All right, and we are back. Well, I think we've got an overview, at least from Sam's point of view, on Article 14, which promises to be the most controversial article I
For
see on
sure.
this warrant.
I agree. But I feel like Sam was able to provide us with a lot of background into our decision-making process for those, who are going to cast a vote on why it is where it is and what the controversy is as far as it being premature in some people's minds and why it's necessary in other people's minds.
Well, I think Sam indicated that while he feels it should have waited and gone forward as a whole come the annual town meeting, that he still supports this change and he envisions this change would have been in the entire redraft. I think he correctly predicted that a lot of other folks agree with him, but will vote the other way
Exactly.
to allow it all to come forward in the spring.
Well, and at this upcoming town meeting, I suppose those questions will be raised, and then we'll get the selectmen's point of view, as to why they, because I can't imagine it's not going to be asked why they feel it's so important to bring it now and to bring it on their own versus have it brought forward by the overall governance committee. So
yeah, and it seems it seems fairly obvious. Maybe it's not obvious. That the reason is that they feel uncomfortable with the acting town manager situation. They'd like to get Mike in the permanent role, even though his power doesn't change, his compensation's not going to change. Maybe the longer term contract that Sam mentioned, that might be a part of it. But they may just be a little uncomfortable because, again, let's face facts, the whole acting thing is kind of this little fiction that's been made up to get around the provision that's in there now. Now, whether it successfully gets around or not, people have opinions about, but it certainly feels that the selectmen would like to kind of put this behind them, get Mike on board as town manager and move forward. And and a lot of other people, certainly in town hall and in government, agree. And in town, I'm sure. But there's certainly a lot of folks in town that have some problems.
and we'll hear from them. But it also seems, given the scope of what they have left to work on as far as the Town Manager Act as a whole, not just this one small piece that defines who can come in and after how much time has passed. I mean, they've got a lot of work to do, so maybe it's put this issue to bed and let the governance committee move forward on, correcting the bylaws, putting down new definitions, getting it really shored up so that we don't have so much interpretation or wiggle room that seems to exist now.
Well, I think one of the unfortunate situations we have here is that people, when they vote on this change, are not going to be voting, my sense is, or some people will not be voting on whether they think it makes sense to change this limitation. Instead, they're going to be voting on whether they like Mike Malinowski or not. And I just, right, wrong, or indifferent, I just think that that's what we're going to be seeing, as opposed to kind of on its merits in a vacuum. Is it best to change this so it's just limited to selectmen as opposed to the way it was?
But then that's another reason to go ahead and get it done, perhaps. Get this settled, stop this contentiousness, because it seems like we've had a strong division for ever since Mike Coughlin came in. We had, it seems like a split right down the middle. He had his fans, he had a lot of people that didn't like him. Now the same thing comes in with Mike. Seems like the same thing. Does this finally put that issue to rest, say, okay, we've got the town manager, enough already with this, let's all join behind him. We've got this new process in place of working together, pulling everybody in for the budget process. Come on, people, let's get going.
But what if it doesn't pass? If it doesn't pass, then we come back in the spring with a complete overhaul, which includes this. And is this then, if it doesn't pass, is that going to pull the whole thing down? And we're back where we are now with a bylaw and a town manager act that don't match up. And again, all because it's a vote on Mike Milanowski as opposed to the merits. We'll have to find out.
Yes, it sounds like we've got everybody on the edge of their seats, Mark.
So Monday, December 10th at the auditorium.
That's right, at the auditorium, broadcast live on channel, I think on channel 9.
Well,
yep.
9 for Comcast.
Yes, and 36 for Verizon, so you can tune in. But of course, you know, you can't vote if you're sitting at home watching, and we may need your vote.
Well, I think whether you're in favor or against, it should be a very interesting debate, and
Always.
And it is, I think, clearly an important issue. So 6:30, right up here at the high school. But until then, I'm Mark DiGiacomo for Pat Martin. Thank you very much for joining us. Good night.